Forced into marriage, a millionaire murmured, "Do not get it twisted. You are nothing more than a contract." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The conference room was silent, the kind of silence that made the glass walls feel colder than usual. Lyla Ramirez stood frozen near the long, polished table, her fingers tightening around the strap of her worn canvas bag. Under the bright ceiling lights, she looked painfully out of place. Her blouse was neatly ironed, but its fabric had faded from too many washes. The man standing across from her, however, looked carved from another world entirely. Adrian Hale, 34 years old, millionaire, CEO of Hale Industries, a company whose value she could not even begin to comprehend. He slid a document toward her, the pages whispering sharply against the glossy table. His expression did not flicker, not even once. His voice was low, steady, and void of sympathy. "Sign it. The marriage happens next week." Lyla's heart pounded so loudly she was convinced he could hear it. She swallowed hard. I do not understand. Why me? I am just an administrative assistant. There must be someone else who—" "There is no one else," Adrian interrupted, cutting through her words like a scalpel. "You were in the wrong place, at the wrong time, and now you are the simplest solution." The memories of the previous week flashed in her mind. The lawsuit, the mistaken identity, the accusation she did not deserve. She had begged the investigators to understand, but the evidence had pointed at her. Even if she was innocent, her job, her home, her entire future hung by a thread. Adrian tapped the contract with a cold, precise rhythm. "You need protection from the legal mess. I need a wife on paper to stabilize the board. This arrangement solves both problems." Lyla stared at the bold black letters. Marriage agreement. A chill crept over her skin. Her voice trembled. Marriage should mean something. A faint, humorless smile touched Adrian's lips for the first time. "Do not fool yourself, Lyla. This is not romance. This is not destiny. This is a transaction." He stepped closer, and for a moment she could see her reflection in his eyes. Small, scared, and swallowed whole by a world of power she never asked to enter. "Do not get it twisted," he murmured, slow and deliberate. "You are nothing more than a contract." The words landed like a slap, leaving a sting she could not rub away. She felt her throat tighten, her chest ached, but behind all of it was reality. She had no one to call, nowhere to go, and no way to survive the fallout if she refused. Her breath shook. "If I sign this, what happens to me?" Adrian returned to his neutral, practiced composure. "You keep your job, you stay out of jail, and for 6 months you play the part of Mrs. Hale. After that, we end the contract and go our separate ways." 6 months, half a year living beside a man who looked at her as nothing more than a solution. Her hand hovered over the pen. The air felt heavy, pressing against her ribs. She closed her eyes for one brief moment, and the image of her mother's old apartment filled her mind. The peeling paint, the quiet mornings, the safety she once felt. All gone now. She opened her eyes. Her signature touched the page with a shaky stroke. Adrian nodded once, a crisp, controlled gesture. "Good. The driver will bring you to the estate tomorrow. Your training starts immediately." Training? She did not even have time to ask what that meant. Adrian turned away, already dismissing her with his silence, and Lyla realized with a hollow ache that signing the contract had been the easy part. Living it, that was where the real story began. The next morning, Lyla stood at the gates of the Hale estate with a small suitcase and a knot in her stomach. The mansion stretched across the hill like a world she was never meant to enter, its stone pillars tall and cold, its windows tinted so dark she could not see inside. A driver had dropped her off without a word. Now she was alone, staring at a life she had signed herself into with one trembling signature. The front door opened. A woman in her 50s, straight-backed and impeccably dressed, stepped out. "I am Mrs. Calloway," she said, "house administrator. Follow me." Her tone was not unkind, but it carried the weight of someone who had served the Hale family long enough to understand power better than most politicians. Lyla followed her inside, her shoes sinking into floors so polished she could see her reflection. They walked through hallways lined with portraits of Hale ancestors, men in suits, women in gowns, people born into legacy, people nothing like her. In this house, Mrs. Calloway said, appearances matter. Mr. Hale will expect you to conduct yourself with poise and restraint. You will have your own room. Meals are taken at 7. A stylist will arrive at 9. The press interview is in 3 days. Lyla almost tripped. Press interview? Mrs. Calloway nodded. You are about to become Mrs. Adrian Hale. The world will want to know who you are. The words felt surreal, as if they belonged to someone else's life. Lyla whispered, I never wanted any of this. Mrs. Calloway slowed her steps, studying the young woman's face. Very few people who enter this house do, she said gently, but you will learn, or it will break you. They reached a large bedroom on the east wing. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, casting warm stripes across a bed bigger than her childhood bedroom. The room was beautiful, but it felt like a gilded cage. Before Lyla could set her suitcase down, she heard footsteps behind her, heavy, controlled. Adrian Hale entered the doorway, dressed in a charcoal suit as if he had stepped straight out of a financial magazine. His eyes swept across the room before landing on her. You are early, he said. I wanted to be prepared, she replied quietly. He studied her, unreadable as ever. Good, you will need that. He moved farther inside, his presence filling the room in a way that made the air feel heavier. I will go over the schedule tonight. For now, Mrs. Calloway will help you adjust. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. We appear together at the charity benefit tomorrow. It will be your first test. Do not draw attention. Do not improvise. And do not forget the terms of our agreement. His voice did not rise, yet every word struck with precision. Lyla nodded, her fingers tightening around the suitcase handle. I understand. Adrian held her gaze for a moment longer, not with warmth, not with cruelty, just calculation, as if assessing whether she could serve the role he needed. Then he left, without another word. When the door closed, the room felt colder. Lyla exhaled a breath she had been holding since he arrived. She was in his world now, bound by rules she barely understood. And tomorrow, she would be placed on display beside a man who saw her as nothing more than a contract. But deep in her chest, a small, unsteady voice whispered something she had not expected. You have survived worse. You can survive this too. It was not courage, not yet, but it was a beginning. Morning arrived with a gray sky hanging low over the Hale estate, and Lyla found herself standing in front of a full-length mirror while a stylist circled her like a hawk in a boutique studio. Racks of designer gowns surrounded them, shimmering under soft lights. Fabric she had only seen in magazines, now brushed against her skin. It felt unreal, like stepping into someone else's reflection. Hold still, the stylist said, adjusting the neckline of a deep navy gown. The charity benefit tonight is your first public appearance. You must look composed, confident, and polished. Lyla tried to smile, but the corners of her mouth barely lifted. I am not sure I fit into any of those words. The stylist paused, softened, and stepped back. You will, once you find your breath. Wealthy rooms can smell fear. Do not let them. The advice sounded strange, but something in it rang true. By late afternoon, her training continued in the estate's grand hallway. Mrs. Calloway stood beside a table set with crystal glasses and silverware. You will learn how to greet donors, how to respond when addressed, and how to walk beside Mr. Hale without falling behind or stepping ahead, she instructed. Every camera will be watching. Lyla practiced holding eye contact. She practiced a graceful nod. She practiced the elegant step and turn Mrs. Calloway demonstrated. But the more she practiced, the more tightly her chest pulled. She asked quietly, "What if I fail?" Mrs. Calloway looked at her with a gentleness Lyla had not expected. Then you learn. No one enters this house perfect, but they all survive by adapting. The words stayed with her even as the evening approached. When Adrian finally appeared at the foot of the staircase, he looked like the embodiment of sharp professionalism. A black tuxedo fit him with precise tailoring, and his expression remained unreadable, as always. His gaze lifted when he heard the soft sweep of fabric on the stairs. Lyla descended, each step careful. The navy gown moved like water around her ankles. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face, but she forced herself to keep walking. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her. "You clean up better than I expected." It was not a compliment, but it was the closest thing she had received from him. "Thank you," she said softly, even though the words stung. He offered his arm, not out of affection, but out of necessity. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand lightly on it. "In public," he said, "you will smile. You will speak only when spoken to, and you will remember that we are united in appearance, nothing more." Lyla nodded. "I understand." The ride to the benefit was quiet. City lights blurred past the tinted windows, casting fleeting reflections across Adrian's stern features and Lyla's tense posture. She watched the skyline rise, feeling her heartbeat grow louder with every mile. When they stepped out, a wave of camera flashes exploded across the entrance. Reporters called Adrian's name, microphones thrust forward. Security guided them up the carpet. Lyla felt her knees wobble, but she kept her hand lightly on Adrian's arm, just as she had practiced. She held her breath, lifted her chin, and stepped into the noise. Inside, chandeliers glittered overhead, and polished marble floors echoed with conversations of politicians, philanthropists, and executives. Expensive perfume drifted through the air. "This," Adrian said under his breath, "is the world you must learn to navigate." Lyla swallowed hard. "I will try." But as she took her first steps deeper into the room, someone nearby murmured loud enough to be heard. "Who is she? She looks nervous. Hale must be desperate." Heat rushed to her face. She forced a smile anyway, even as her stomach twisted. Adrian glanced briefly at her, then away, as if reminding himself not to care. It was her first test, and she already felt the weight of all eyes pressing against her skin. The soft music drifting through the ballroom could not hide the tension building inside Lyla's chest. She kept her posture straight, repeating Mrs. Calloway's instructions in her mind, but every whisper she caught from nearby tables chipped away at her confidence. "Who is that girl with Adrian Hale? She looks terrified. She must not belong here." The words were not shouted, but they did not need to be. They slipped into her ears like cold needles. Adrian guided her to a circle of donors, each dressed in gowns and suits that looked impossibly expensive. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes measured everything about her, from her trembling hands to the cautious curve of her lips. "Good evening," Adrian said, his tone smooth and authoritative. "This is Lyla Ramirez." Several eyebrows lifted. A woman with diamond earrings leaned in slightly. "Oh? We did not know Mr. Hale was seeing someone." Lyla tried to speak, but her voice snagged on her breath. Adrian stepped in immediately. "She is private," he said simply, "and prefers to stay out of the spotlight." The donors nodded, satisfied with the explanation. But Lyla felt the subtle shift in their expressions. Curiosity, skepticism, judgment. It sat on her skin like a stain she could not scrub off. A man nearby lifted a glass. "Well, welcome, Ms. Ramirez. I hope you enjoy your first benefit." Lyla smiled, small but sincere. "Thank you. I am grateful to be here." Her voice wavered, but she got the words out. For a brief moment, she thought she had managed to steady herself. Then someone whispered behind her, not bothering to lower their voice. "She does not look like someone who fits the Hale name." Heat spread across Lyla's cheeks. Her throat tightened. She wanted to disappear, to fold into the carpet and vanish entirely. Adrian's jaw tensed. For the first time, he glanced at her with something that resembled awareness. Not tenderness, not yet, but a faint recognition that she was struggling beside him. He leaned closer, keeping his voice low. "Breathe. Hold your head up." She inhaled shakily, trying to do exactly that. But the night grew more difficult when a donor approached with a condescending smile. "So Lyla," he said, "what exactly do you do?" Her pulse spiked. She had practiced answers, but her mind blanked under the weight of so many eyes. I work in administration," she said softly. "Oh," the man replied, his gaze flickering with thinly veiled amusement. "How quaint." Lyla felt her chest cave inward. Before she could retreat, a waitress carrying a tray passed too closely behind her. Lyla stepped aside instinctively, her heel catching the edge of the carpet. She wobbled, panic flaring, and Adrian caught her waist before she fell. The room went silent for a split second. He steadied her, his grip firm, his expression hardening at the watching crowd. "She is fine," he said, his tone edged with warning, "and she belongs exactly where she is." The words were simple, but they hit Lyla with unexpected force. He had not defended her kindly, but he had defended her. For a man who claimed she was nothing more than a contract, it was more than she expected. Lyla straightened, forcing her balance back under her feet. "Thank you," she whispered. Adrian released her slowly. "Do not thank me," he replied. "Just stay focused." But there was something different in the way he looked at her, a flicker of something new, something that had not been there before. Maybe it was the first crack in the armor he wore so fiercely. Lyla exhaled, trying to steady herself once more. She survived her first stumble. She survived her first round of whispers, and for the first time that night, she wondered if she might survive the rest of this world as well, even if she had to learn it step by trembling step. The ballroom slowly shifted into smaller pockets of conversation as the evening went on, but Lyla remained hyper-aware of every glance and every whispered remark. Her palms were damp, and the smile she kept wearing felt more like a mask carved onto her face. Yet something had changed after Adrian steadied her. He walked just a little closer now, close enough that she could sense his presence without looking at him. A new group of guests approached, and Lyla braced herself. But instead of harsh questions or scrutiny, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes smiled warmly. "I have not seen you before," the woman said. "I am Eleanor Wade. I run the Foundation's youth program." Lyla nodded, surprised by the woman's kindness. "It is very nice to meet you. I am still learning about all of this." Eleanor laughed, gentle and understanding. "We all start somewhere. Do not let the pressure here convince you that you are less than you are." The sincerity in her voice eased some of the tightness around Lyla's heart. Before she could say more, a deeper male voice cut in sharply. "Learning is one thing, pretending is another." A tall man stepped into the circle, his expression smug. Lyla recognized him from earlier exchanges across the room. His name was Douglas Crane, a longtime rival of Adrian's and a regular critic of Hale Industries. He looked Lyla up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I suppose standards are slipping if anyone can walk into these events now." Heat rose in Lyla's cheeks. Her voice trembled. I did not mean to cause any trouble." Douglas smirked. "Of course you did not, but you have succeeded anyway." Before Lyla could step back, Adrian positioned himself between them, his shoulders squared. "Crane, you are out of line." Douglas lifted his glass casually. "I am simply asking questions. For instance, where did you find her? She seems unprepared." The crowd around them stilled. Lyla felt exposed again, as if she were standing alone under a harsh spotlight. Adrian's voice dropped to a controlled, icy tone. "Her name is Lyla Ramirez, and she is not the one who needs preparation. You are the one who needs manners." A few nearby guests exchanged startled glances. Douglas raised an eyebrow, amused. "Protective tonight, are we?" Adrian did not rise to the bait. Instead, he gestured toward the entrance hall. "Leave the event, now. You know the rules against inappropriate conduct." The room buzzed with surprise. Douglas scoffed, but security was already making their way over. He gave Lyla one last disdainful look before walking off, grumbling beneath his breath. As the tension slowly cleared, Lyla realized she was shaking. Adrian noticed and leaned toward her slightly. "You handled yourself adequately." It was not praise, but it was not cruelty either. It was the closest thing to reassurance he seemed capable of offering. She looked down, trying to steady her breath. "I did not want you to defend me." "I did not defend you," he replied quietly. "I defended the stability of the evening, nothing more." But the way he said it lacked conviction, almost as if he was trying to convince himself more than her. Eleanor Wade touched Lyla's arm gently. "You did well. Do not let men like Douglas decide how you see yourself." Lyla nodded, grateful. As Adrian guided her away from the crowd, she noticed something subtle in his posture. Less rigid, less distant, almost aware. For the first time since she entered this arrangement, Lyla sensed a shift she could not name, a small fracture in the wall Adrian built around himself. And though she would never admit it out loud, That fracture made her heart beat just a little louder. The ride back to the Hale estate was quieter than usual. Not the cold, distant silence Adrian preferred, but a different kind of quiet, one filled with unspoken thoughts and shifting awareness. Lyla sat beside him in the back seat of the black sedan, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She kept replaying the evening in her mind, every whisper, every stare, every moment she almost fell apart, and every moment he stepped in before she did. When they entered the mansion, Mrs. Calloway greeted them briefly before disappearing down the hallway. Staff members moved like shadows across the marble floors, giving the couple space. Lyla walked toward the staircase, her steps slow, her nerves still coiled inside her chest. "Lyla," Adrian said behind her. She stopped. His voice sounded different, lower and less controlled. She turned to face him, her gown shimmering softly under the foyer lights. "You handled more than I expected tonight," he said. It was the closest thing to praise she had ever heard from him. She searched his expression, trying to understand whether he meant it or if it was merely a strategic observation. His face remained hard to read, but his eyes did not have the same cold distance from earlier that day. "I tried my best," she replied, "even when it felt like I was drowning." Something in Adrian's posture shifted. He loosened his tie, a rare gesture of vulnerability. "Events like these are not easy," he admitted, "even for people born into them." Lyla hesitated before asking, "Is that why you do not seem to enjoy them?" Adrian looked away, just for a moment, as if revealing anything personal required effort. "They remind me of how performative everything is, how little of it is real." His honesty surprised her. She stepped closer without thinking. "Then why keep doing it?" "Because the company depends on it," he answered, "and people are waiting to watch me fail." She could hear the exhaustion beneath his words, the kind that could not be seen in newspapers or business magazines. She realized then that Adrian Hale was not simply cold. He was guarded, fortified, built on disappointments no one else saw. "Earlier," she said softly, "when you stepped in, you did not have to." He met her eyes again. "Douglas Crane crossed the line. That is all." Lyla held his gaze. "But you noticed I was scared." Adrian did not confirm or deny it. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as if the truth pressed too close. "Fear is natural," he said, "but you managed it. That matters." The warmth that spread through her chest startled her. She looked away quickly, afraid he might see it on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. The silence that followed was not sharp or uncomfortable. It was something gentler, something that made the mansion feel less cavernous. After a moment, Adrian spoke again. "There is something you should know." Lyla straightened. "What is it?" "My family did not want me to marry," he said. "They wanted to pick someone themselves, someone who fit their image. I refused. And the last time I stood up to them, it cost me more than you can imagine." He stopped, jaw tightening. Lyla's voice softened. "You do not have to tell me everything." "I am not used to being questioned," he said quietly, "or understood." She took a step closer, her voice almost a whisper. "I am not here to hurt you, Adrian." His eyes flickered, surprised, almost uncertain. For the first time, he looked less like a man carved from stone, and more like someone carrying a weight too heavy for one lifetime. Adrian cleared his throat and broke the moment. "It has been a long night. Get some rest. Tomorrow we review the next phase of the agreement." But as he walked away, his steps were slower, as if he too had felt the shift neither of them dared to name. And when Lyla went up the stairs, her heart beat with a new, careful question. What if the man behind this contract was beginning to crack open in ways neither of them expected? The next week unfolded with a strict routine, tighter and more demanding than anything Lyla had ever known. Morning etiquette drills, afternoon introductions to executive staff, evening reviews with Adrian. Each day she learned something new about how the wealthy moved, spoke, and presented themselves. But she also learned something subtle about Adrian himself. He watched everything. He measured every detail. And sometimes, when he thought she did not notice, his attention lingered a moment too long. On Thursday morning, Lyla was reviewing press guidelines with Mrs. Calloway when the mansion's front doors opened sharply. A tall man stepped inside, accompanied by two advisors in tailored suits. His expression was confident, almost arrogant, and his eyes swept the foyer with practiced familiarity. "Good morning," he announced. "I'm looking for Adrian." Mrs. Calloway stiffened. "Mr. Hale is in a meeting. You may wait in the study." The man's gaze slid past her and landed on Lyla. His smile widened with a hint of amusement. "And you must be the reason the entire board is whispering." Lyla felt her stomach tighten. I am Lyla Ramirez." "So I have heard." He extended his hand in a manner that felt more like a test than a greeting. Julian Hale, Adrian's cousin. The name struck her. This was one of the family members Adrian had mentioned, one of those who believed he should not control the company. Julian studied her closely. "The board is quite curious about you, Ms. Ramirez. A sudden engagement, no public background, no society ties. Quite the mystery." Mrs. Calloway stepped forward protectively. "Mr. Hale will not appreciate you interrogating his fiancée." Julian chuckled. "Interrogating? I'm simply interested. After all, our family has a reputation to maintain." His words carried the same polished cruelty she had heard at the benefit, but sharper, more intentional. Before she could respond, Adrian's voice echoed from the upstairs landing. "Julian." His tone was flat and cold. Julian turned, spreading his arms as if greeting an old friend. "There you are. I thought I would stop by to congratulate you in person." Adrian descended the stairs slowly, his expression unreadable. "Your concern is noted. You can leave now." "Already? I have barely met your bride-to-be," Julian smirked. "And the board is eager for clarity. Many are concerned that this engagement seems rushed." Lyla felt the blood drain from her face. She knew exactly where this was heading. Julian continued. "Some even believe the arrangement is not entirely organic." Adrian's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you implying?" Julian's eyes flicked toward Lyla, then back to Adrian. "Only that the board would be very unhappy if they discovered your engagement was based on convenience rather than love." The room fell silent. The implication was clear. If Julian exposed the truth about the contract, Adrian's position at the company would crumble. "Careful," Adrian said slowly. "You are walking a dangerous line." Julian stepped close, lowering his voice. "The board meets tomorrow. I suggest you prepare a convincing narrative. And I also suggest she prepares one too." He nodded at Lyla, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes, before walking out with his advisors. The doors closed behind him, leaving a heavy stillness in the foyer. Lyla exhaled shakily. He knows. He knows everything." Adrian turned to her, his face taut with tension she had never seen before. "Julian is dangerous, but he does not have proof." He paused. "Not yet." "But he could expose us," she whispered. "He could ruin you." Adrian met her eyes, and for once, his controlled composure showed a crack. "I will handle Julian. You focus on your part." Her voice trembled. "What if I cannot?" His reply was immediate. "You can." There was no softness in his voice, but there was certainty. A certainty he had never offered her before. And for the first time, Lyla sensed that the battle ahead was not only about the contract anymore. It was about something deeper, something Adrian was only beginning to realize, something that might cost them both far more than they expected. The board meeting arrived faster than Lyla expected. The entire Hale estate felt tense, as if every marble surface and every staff member sensed a storm coming. Adrian spent the morning in the study reviewing documents, pacing with a focus so sharp that no one dared interrupt him. Lyla watched from the doorway, unsure whether to step in or give him space. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a level of exhaustion she had not seen before. "The board will attack every weak point today," he said. "Julian will use anything he can to undermine us." Lyla swallowed. "And I am one of those weak points." Adrian closed the folder in his hands. "You are not weak, but Julian believes you are. That is what he will push." She approached slowly, her hands clasped together. "Adrian, what if he reveals the contract?" "He does not have proof," Adrian replied, "but he will try to create suspicion. You must stay calm." He said it with firmness, but there was something quieter beneath it, as if he was asking her to trust him, even when he could not promise safety. When they arrived at the Hale Industries headquarters, the atmosphere was ice cold. Board members filled the long conference table, each with sharp eyes and stiff expressions. Julian sat near the center, looking entirely too comfortable, fingers tapping rhythmically on the polished wood. Adrian entered with Lyla beside him, her posture straight, her heart pounding. Flashbulbs from waiting photographers burst through the hallway windows. Gossip blogs had caught wind of the sudden engagement, and the board was hungry for answers. As soon as the meeting began, Julian leaned forward. Before we proceed with quarterly analysis, I believe we need clarity on the sudden engagement announcement. Several board members nodded. One said, "It does seem unexpected, Adrian. A major decision for the company. We would like to understand the circumstances." Julian added with a sharp smile, "Some might even call it conveniently timed." Lyla felt the tension spike. She stared at her clasped hands, willing them not to shake. Adrian's voice remained calm. "My personal life does not diminish my leadership. The engagement stands. Lyla is my fiancée, and she will be treated with respect." Julian chuckled softly. "Respect is earned, cousin, and the board deserves transparency. Unless, of course, there is something about this engagement you prefer to keep hidden." His gaze flicked to Lyla with cold triumph. Lyla forced herself to lift her eyes. She knew this moment mattered. She knew one wrong move could fracture everything. "I understand the concern," she said, steadying her voice. "The timing may seem sudden, but I am committed to supporting Mr. Hale. I am learning every day, and I intend to represent this company with dignity." Julian tilted his head. "Touching. But forgive me, I cannot help noticing how unfamiliar you seem with our world. Where exactly did you two meet? How long has this romance been going on?" Her breath hitched. She had prepared for questions, but Julian's tone scraped against every insecurity she held. Adrian answered for her, his voice cold. "That is not relevant." Julian smiled slowly. "Ah, then maybe we should discuss financial disclosures, prenuptial agreements, public statements. The board requires—" "Enough," Adrian snapped. The room froze. Adrian stood, placing both hands on the table, leaning forward with icy precision. "This engagement is legitimate. It is not up for debate. And anyone who believes they can weaponize my fiancé for political leverage has underestimated both of us." For the first time, Adrian's defense was not detached. It was fierce, personal. Julian's expression faltered for a split second, but then he delivered the blow he had been saving. "Well then," Julian said, voice smooth as poison, "you will not mind if the board reviews all documents related to your engagement. Full transparency, for company integrity." Adrian's eyes darkened. This was it. The threat that would expose everything. Lyla felt her stomach drop. If the board demanded documents, the contract would come to light, and everything they had built, every fragile step forward, would collapse. Adrian spoke slowly, each word razor sharp. "This meeting is adjourned." He grabbed Lyla's hand and led her out before the board could protest. As the doors shut behind them, she felt the tremor in his grip. Not fear, anger, fury at losing control of the narrative. "Julian will destroy me," Adrian said under his breath, "and he will enjoy every second of it." Lyla looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth behind his hardened expression. He was afraid of losing the company he had built his entire life around. "Adrian," she whispered, "what can we do?" He met her eyes with a quiet desperation she had never seen before. "I do not know," he admitted, "but if this contract comes out, everything ends." The drive back to the Hale estate felt heavier than any night before. Neither Adrian nor Lyla spoke, yet both understood that the board's demand for full transparency meant only one thing. Their contract was no longer a secret hanging quietly in the shadows. It was a ticking clock, and time was running out. When they entered the mansion, Adrian went straight to the study. Lyla followed him, not out of obligation, but because something inside her would not let her step away. He stood by the window, staring out at the dark gardens, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "This is my fault," he said finally. "I brought you into this. I made you a target." Lyla shook her head. "Julian chose to go after me. That is not on you." Adrian turned toward her, and for the first time, his guarded composure cracked completely. "You do not understand. If the contract is exposed, the board will remove me. I will lose everything I have built. And you will be dragged through a public scandal because of me." His voice faltered, something she never imagined possible from a man like him. Lyla stepped closer. "Adrian, listen to me. You fought for me in that room. You fought harder than you realized, and now I will fight too." He looked at her sharply. "Why? You owe me nothing." She exhaled, feeling the truth rising, steady and undeniable. "Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a contract. Maybe you cannot see it yet, but I can." He stared at her, stunned by the words he had never expected to hear. Before he could respond, the study doors burst open. Mrs. Calloway hurried in, holding a small leather folder. "I believe this belongs to you, Mr. Hale," she said softly. "It was misplaced among old family documents. I think you should see it." Adrian took the folder and opened it. His breath caught. Inside was a letter written by his late father, addressed to the board. It declared Adrian as the rightful successor of Hale Industries, regardless of marital status. It rendered Julian's entire strategy meaningless. Lyla covered her mouth. This changes everything." Adrian read the letter twice, disbelief melting into relief. "My father wrote this before the accident. I never knew it existed." Mrs. Calloway nodded. "Your cousin did. That is why he wanted to control the archives." The realization hit both of them. Julian's power was built on a lie. Adrian exhaled, a sound filled with the weight of years. "This protects the company. It protects us." Lyla felt her heart swell at the word, us. Later that evening, the board was summoned for an emergency session. Adrian presented the letter, each word striking like a gavel echoing through the room. Julian's confidence evaporated as the board members read the document, their expressions shifting from confusion to certainty to restrained fury. Within minutes, a vote was taken. Julian was removed from his position, escorted out with the same arrogance he had walked in with, only now backed by nothing. When the meeting ended and everyone filed out, Adrian waited until the room was empty before speaking to Lyla. "You saved me today," he said quietly. "You saved yourself," she replied. "Your father saved you too." He stepped closer, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "No, you saved me from becoming a man who hides behind rules and contracts. You made me see what I was afraid to see." Her breath caught. "Adrian." He reached for her hand, slowly, as if asking permission with his silence. "I told you once that you were nothing more than a contract. But that was a lie I told myself, to avoid feeling anything real." Lyla's eyes warmed. "What do you feel now?" He held her gaze, steady and unguarded for the first time. "That I want you," he said. "Not as a fiancé on paper, not as a solution. I want you as my partner, for real." Her heartbeat trembled. "Are you asking me?" He lowered himself to one knee, the harsh boardroom lights turning gentle around them. He did not offer a contract this time. He offered a small velvet box, holding a ring that glimmered with sincerity rather than obligation. "Lyla Ramirez," he said, "will you marry me without the contract, without fear, without pretending?" Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming truth she now felt. "Yes," she whispered, "I will." Adrian rose and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since they met, the embrace was not part of a performance. It was real. It was warm. It was earned. As they held each other, Lyla realized something profound. She had entered this mansion as a terrified woman trapped in a cold agreement. But she was leaving this boardroom as something entirely different. A partner, a choice, a love he no longer feared.